Hello, and welcome back to episode 2. We're already
Yay.
here. Can you believe it?
I know. It's really exciting. We're doing it. We're like, again, every time we record one, I'm
Crazy.
like, oh, we're doing this. This is happening. We're
I
making a
told one of my
podcast.
students yesterday, and she was like, oh man, I can't wait
Oh, that's awesome.
to hear
Yeah,
what
I'm
you're
excited
doing.
about this. I'm
Yes.
excited.
Well, let's go back and review. If you are new here and you haven't listened to episode 1 yet, please go back and check that out. We introduced ourselves. Again, I'm Shanna.
And I'm Heather.
And we told a little bit of our backstories. And today we're going to dive in a little deeper about like how we actually connected and the transformative experience that really solidified our friendship. And we realized again just how much we had in common. And we thought if we're going through this, then probably other people are also going through this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
And so in episode 1, we talked a lot about friendship and how we made friends and gave some tips about how to make friends and some suggestions. So we challenged you to make one. So I'm wondering if anybody went out and actually did that.
Yeah. If you guys did, definitely, we put in the last episode ways to contact us. Let us know. And I want to hear your stories. And also we talked about like what are different tips and different ways that you make friends that maybe we didn't come up with or we didn't list? We're on the journey of moving around and making new friends, so keep pouring those stories in and let us know.
And we actually do practice what we preach. So I had a colleague ask about, she knows that my fiance and my son both rodeo. And so she was like, I've never been to a rodeo. Can you take me to one? And I was like,
Oh, cool.
yes. So that idea of, finding commonalities are the places that you like to go. So I am going to reach out. I'm not normally one
Yay.
to be the initiator. Again, that's what I always depended on you for when we lived in the same town. So I will do that as well.
Cool. When's the rodeo?
I don't know yet, actually. I'll have to look at the schedules because I think she wants to go to a rodeo, and we do a lot of
Okay.
ropings where that's the only
Gotcha.
event. There's not all the
Yeah.
other fun stuff like bull riding and things. So I'll have to
Yeah, you
find out.
gotta, first experience has to be the whole package. You gotta see all of it, all the
Yes.
things, and just sit there like
Yes.
I did in the stands being like, what is going on? This is so confusing. Why are the cows on the other side of the line? What's happening? What is cutting? I have no idea.
Yes. Yes. I love sitting with people during their first time to go to a rodeo. Their
It's
reactions are amazing.
fascinating. It's so cool to see. I mean, what a beautiful skill. It really is just watching people and like obviously barrel racing is so cool. It's like fascinating. It's like watching race cars, but it really is in person, like watching those riders and those horses move is stunning. That's a
Hmm.
really cool thing to watch. And
Hmm.
roping, I mean, not a chance in hell would I ever be good at that. So I'm
Well,
always
we know that
watching
I
like,
wouldn't, right?
right.
We talked about my throwing. We know I wouldn't.
Yes, per last episode, if you didn't listen, Shanna is a fitleat, not an athlete. Throwing's not her strength.
At
So,
all.
don't invite her to a basketball game to play. Um, me either, for that fact, actually. I hate basketball. Don't invite me to that either. It's my
No
least
playing
favorite
catch,
sport.
nothing. Yeah.
Wait, so what was it like growing up with Cinch? And like, were you ever playing catch with him, or was that
Oh,
just an
he
experience
hated
he
it.
didn't have? Okay.
He hated it because I could catch the ball, but when I would throw it back to him, he would have to go chase it because there's no
He's
telling where it
just
would go.
doing sprints the whole time. Like,
It's basically like playing fetch with a dog, right? Like he was the dog.
stop. Oh
He was
my
like, "No, mom,
gosh.
I'll just throw it against the house or something." Like,
Oh, he's the poor kid by himself, like playing catch in the back. Oh my gosh.
yes,
That's
yes,
hilarious. Oh
yes.
my gosh. I never even thought about that until just now. Like, oh yeah, you grew up a little kid, probably wanted to play some catch, and you're like,
Yeah.
nope. That's funny.
Last night I had to drive the skid loader for the first time by myself
Okay, wait, you
to
have to
move.
explain what a skid loader is.
Like a front end loader, like a little mini thing with a bucket on the front, right? That you lift, pick
Okay,
up, like you're gonna go pick up rocks. It's just a little mini
gotcha.
one person
Okay.
tractor, right? And I needed to put out hay for the cows because Will is gone and I've never driven it. And it's got like joystick handles.
Mm-hmm.
So like you have to go forward and back and then in and out to do different
Oh
stuff. And my
gosh.
right brain, left brain cross just doesn't work. So like when I was trying to back up, like to make it go back into the left was like counter what my natural instinct, which way I would naturally
Oh
push
no.
it.
Is it
So,
opposite from like a car? Like the
well, it doesn't
backing
have a
up?
steering wheel, right? Like
But the
it's
direction
either,
is different? I don't know, I've never been
yeah,
in one of these
kind of.
things. Okay.
Yeah, because if you're going to back up, you're going to pull this way to go to make your back end go this way. I don't know. It's
Right.
just backwards to my brain. And it was comical. And I'm glad no one was there to see it.
I was gonna say, please tell me you filmed it. At least to send to Will. Be like, this is what's
Well, I had to
happening
have him
when
on
you're
the
not
phone to
here.
tell me how to operate it. And so I couldn't film it
Oh my gosh. Did you FaceTime for that, or was this a verbal, like, telling you how to
verbal.
do it? Wow, that's
Verbal.
impressive. I can't do that. I'm like, no, you need to FaceTime with me and you need to show me exactly what hand needs to go in what direction. Like,
Okay, so have you ever thought about if you and Ryan would be good on a reality show, like a couples challenge
no, it'd
show?
be terrible. Well, okay, wait. Challenge in what way?
Like the
Physical
Amazing Race
activities?
or Amazing Race or something where there's logistics and you have to solve it and you have to teamwork.
Yes, we would kill it. Like,
Yeah.
our brains work really well in those scenarios. Like he's very because he loves that stuff. Like his whole life is like tactical everything and like he loves teamwork. Like even when we do CrossFit competitions, he will not compete with me unless it's a competition that has a purpose. Like there has to be an end result of like why are we doing this? And he prefers
Yeah.
partner wads over working out by himself. Um and we always do like our Sunday dates, like when we first started dating, we'd have coffee and make pancakes, and we'd sit down and fill out those puzzle books, like all of the mystery puzzle books or the, different like figure out the secret message puzzle books. And yeah, so I
Oh,
think we'd be really
fun.
good with that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
his engine can go for days. Like on an Amazing Race kind of thing, I'd be the person like 2 days in that's like, cool, this sucks. Can we go home? And like, where's my coffee? And he could just go forever. So he's a good endurance pusher. Like when we do Murph or any type of like hero workout, like he's my come on, you got it. Let's go. Keep moving, guy. So that's yeah, I think we'd be okay. Now if it was like one of those game shows that's like the wedding game or whatever, where you have to like
Oh, the
you
newlywed game?
yeah, we'd fail. We're both so bad at that. Like we can't answer questions about each other. I mean the basic stuff, yeah, like favorite color and da da da. But like some other things, we've done those like online quizzes, and we're both way off with each other. And we're like, well, I hope this lasts. I don't know.
Yes. I think we're going to we have on the list to do a future episode about like personality tests and assessments. And you and I definitely have
Yes.
that in common because I do the same thing to Will. I'm like, what's your Enneagram number?
Yeah.
And fill out this little, this quiz to see if we're compatible. Like the old
Yes.
school days when we would fill out the quizzes in the magazines. I
Oh
don't know if
my
you ever did that,
gosh.
if you're old
Yeah, of
enough.
course.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh my. And then you have to add up all of like how many A's did you get? How many B's did you get? And then you have to tally it up. And then you have to go to the end of the magazine page and like, what is my number? Yes. Oh my gosh. There's still some quizzes online that make you do that, and it makes me so mad. I'm like, technology is way past this. I should not be having to do math, okay? Just give me my answer.
A lot of the assessments that I use in my health classes that I teach are still that way. And my students, it just blows their minds to have to do that. So I'm
Oh my
trying to work on like
gosh.
adapting them to simplify them, but it's funny. It's still like that.
Yeah. What are some of the assessments that you guys do?
I have them do like two different stress questionnaires, and I have them do one to calculate their physiological age versus their biological
Oh,
age,
fun.
and then some stuff about like relationships because I do a chapter on relationships, and so yeah, just pretty much almost every chapter in my health textbook has some kind of like self awareness assessment of them,
I
checking to
like
see
that.
where
That's
they
cool.
are.
That's
Yeah,
so
so a lot of
important. I think
assessments.
that's such a big missing piece. And I love that you're like bringing that into the education level because in health and wellness and nutrition, a big missing piece is all of the other factors, right? That when we say the word, I mean, it's so trendy now to be like whole person wellness. And it's like, but then coaches are still just doing nutrition and fitness. And it's like, that's
Hmm.
not whole person. Like you're missing out on so many other factors and
Hmm.
helping them learn about themselves. And um, we do with my online nutrition clients, anybody who's going through like if we're going to be cutting or doing fat loss, which I'm not like that's not my normal go-to. Like most of my work is just being healthy and what does that mean and look like for you. But if we do, they have to fill out what it's called a deep health questionnaire every month. And it talks about all that stuff. What are your stress levels like? What's your work life like? Are you supported around you? Like what's going on emotionally? Where's your mental health right now? And um And it's wild to me how many stories I've heard from coaches or from clients who have worked with other coaches where the coach is upset because, the client lost a bunch of weight and then gained it back really fast, or they, their body didn't acclimate the way that they thought it was going to. And it's like, oh, but you're doing your macros and you're doing this. You must be lying to me. It's like, or you as a coach are missing something else that's going on in their life that's
Mhm.
affecting their body, then not allowing their body to adapt the way that it needs to. So I love that. I love that you're bringing that in with the younger next generation of, nutrition and health and wellness. That's awesome.
Yeah, tying in what you said about Ryan with the why, he needs a purpose. I'm very much a why
Mm-hmm.
person. And in all of the research, they show that people, when they are going into a new fitness plan or a nutrition plan, it shows that if they don't have a true why and they can't connect that why on those days when they don't want to do it, they're so much less likely to succeed and to actually achieve their goals. And it can't be
Absolutely.
something like, I'm losing weight just because society says I'm fat, or just because my husband, told me I'm looking a little chunky today. It has to be really enrooted in them. And
Yep.
one of my colleagues and I were actually having this debate about your personal values, because he's
Yeah.
the science person, right? He's the exercise physiologist. He's really into the physiology and the numbers and the statistics, but he doesn't get the personal narrative of, of health.
Yeah. And that is so important. You're right. It's like if you don't have that reason, and same thing with so many of my clients, like we sit down and we have conversation before we even start. I'm like, why are you here? And it's like, oh, I want to lose weight. Okay, why? And then once you
Mm-hmm.
lose that weight, then what? What's next,
Yep.
right? And so many people don't think that far ahead. And it's like after you lose the 20 pounds that you are here telling me you want to lose, then what? How is your life different? And if your life isn't different, then we don't have a good enough rooted cause as to why you want to do this. And I
Yeah.
love when people come back to me and they're like, "Oh, I want to lose weight because I want to be more comfortable playing with my kids." I'm like, that's
Mm-hmm.
a long-term why. That ability
Yeah.
to play with your children as they grow up, the ability to keep up with your kids. Like, I love that both my parents work out with me in the gym. Like, when I was in Alpine, right, when we moved out there, my dad is the one that introduced me to the gym because he was working out there. My dad was at the time in his late 50s, right? And people were coming up to me all the time, even the owners, and they were like, "That's your dad? He's a badass." And I was like, "I know, like he is such a badass." And it's like that's a why for people is, can you keep up with your kids forever? Right. And my mom was just here a few months ago. She came and did her first like legit CrossFit workout with me. She did two of them 2 days in a row. And she's like, yeah. And I was
Yeah.
like, that's cool. Like my mom's going to
Yeah.
turn 60 in October. I love that my mom can still work out with me. Um, yeah, it's so important to have a why.
Yeah, and
Man, you're
especially
a
on those
good,
days when
good
you just want
teacher.
to eat junk and, ditch the gym and all your healthy habits,
Mm,
when you remember why you're doing it, then it's like, okay, well, like I set this goal and I have this reason and I'm trying to set an example for my children, or I'm trying to, change something about my life. Like that's a bigger reason than just, oh, I've got to burn 500 calories today.
right. Yeah. And it's, like
Yes.
you said, like the bigger reason, it's what do we want our lives to look like? And I think
Yep.
so much through this process, when we start to dig into that, let's say we take it through the lens of nutrition and weight loss, like we're doing, like once you start to ask people why, all these other things come up. All these other triggers come through, and it's like, well, why am I binge eating? Why am I not eating? Why am I overworking out? Why am I not sleeping well? Why am I not doing this? And then they sit back, and I've had people that are like, hey, I have to go get therapy now. Right. And it's like, that's good. Like, I want you to go do that. And if that's the priority for you right now, then that's your priority. Like the gym will
Yeah.
still be here. Nutrition will still be here. Go
Yep.
do what you need to do for your mental health. And sometimes I think we forget this too, as not only as coaches, but also as people, like just humans going through the journey. Is like, my fitness and my nutrition are not always going to be the top of my priority list. And
Hmm.
that's okay. And I think
Exactly.
society makes it seem like that's not okay. And it's like, if you fall off one day or one week, you failed. And it's like, no, no, no. Your priority shifted. And that's okay. And right now it's like, hey, maybe it's more important to work on that relationship with your partner. Maybe you and your partner are having a really rough time and you don't have the mental bandwidth to also prioritize your nutrition and your fitness. Now, when it stays there, right, when you never come back to it, then that's a problem. But it's
Hmm.
okay that, hey, for a couple months, my partner and I are going to therapy, or I'm doing work on myself, or I have to go do whatever, that is happening. And then once that kind of fizzles back into a place that I can control, then I can kind of bring this back up. So,
Hmm.
yeah. Um, Speaking of therapy,
Well, I was actually going to ask you what healthy habit are you focusing on? Where are you at on
mm,
the circle right now, the
that's right,
wheel?
our healthy habits.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll recap it too, since we're only in episode 2. For if you're just tuning in, we are going to try to kick off these episodes with healthy habits and or gratitude things that we're doing individually, and share that with you all and keep us accountable, right? So check in with us and be like, hey, you said you were doing such and such. How's that going? So my healthy habit right now, help me, is listening to my body. And I know that doesn't sound like a habit, but it's something that I'm trying to wake up every single day and be like, where am I at? Like on a
Mhm.
scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I feel freaking amazing and I can take on the world, I'm superwoman. 1 being like I feel like a dumpster fire. Where do I fall? And then how do I approach my day based on that scale? And it's
Okay.
not like right when I wake up, right? Because 1, I wake up super early. And usually for most of us, like we need to move a little bit. We need the day to start before we get an actual assessment of self. Like if we just roll
Hmm.
out of bed and hit the alarm, everyone's probably going like, "Oh, I feel terrible. Like this day sucks." But once you get moving, you have your cup of coffee or you do whatever, that's usually when I sit down like, "All right, where am I at? Where am I at mentally? Where am I at physically? Where am I falling on that spectrum of 1 to 10?" Um and then allowing myself to approach the day with that number in mind. And
Okay.
it'll fluctuate throughout the day, but it's been really helpful when approaching my workouts, especially, and just being more mindful of, maybe today I'm not spending the whole workout in zone 5. Like that's not
Hmm.
necessary, or maybe I don't work out like Tuesday. Yeah, I didn't work out and it was hard, but I was like, no, my body is not ready. Like it's just not a day for me to do this. I was moving, I was active, but I didn't outside of coaching, I didn't lift a barbell or touch a dumbbell.
Hmm.
So that's mine. That's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
practice right now. What do you
I
have
love
going
that. I love that awareness because I think that's something that you're not being dictated by a schedule or a training plan or a nutrition plan or anything else. You're really being intuitive. And I think that's so important. I think a lot of people get lost in that because they think they have to stick to this plan. And if they fall off the plan, then it's just scrap it all and go back to just
on? Yeah,
trash, you know?
right. Yeah, the all or nothing mentality.
Yeah. For me right now, I think mine is actually trying to stop being so influenced by social media. And I think
Ooh,
that sounds
right.
weird, maybe coming from my age, but I was having some digestive issues, and kind of like you said earlier about like you looked at something and now it's always in your feed, right? Well,
Yeah.
so now my feed is nothing but what's wrong with you. We've got the answer. We know how to
Oh,
fix it. Buy
yeah.
our product or buy our program or let me coach you. And I kind of found myself sucked into almost this like hypochondriac like zone of something is so wrong with me, and I've got to run all these tests and I've got to buy all these products and I've got to do all this to fix me. And it just turned
Yeah.
into my social media feed just turned into you're not good, you need to be fixed. And I was letting that kind of even get to me mentally as well, right? Like you're not good, you're not,
Yeah.
you need
Oh
to be
my
fixed.
gosh. I think that's an awesome thing that you're, again, self-awareness, being like, hey, how is this affecting me? And I think we've got in our episode list too coming up to talk about social media influence and the mindset stuff, because this is huge, especially with the younger generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That effect. And it's, imagine, you at 14 experiencing what you're experiencing, you're probably not going to have the mental awareness of self to go,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this isn't good for me. Like, this is creating that negative thought loop of I'm not good enough and I'm not healthy and I have to do bye, 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 bye in order to fix myself. Yeah. So, what have you done with that? Like, have you gone in and unfollowed people or tried to like mess with your algorithm at all to change that, or are you limiting screen time?
A little bit limiting screen time. I really kind of tried to completely get off of it, social media, and I realized that
Okay.
that was drastic, like from one extreme to the other, because I don't really watch TV either, and I'm by myself a lot. So if I don't have, I feel like sometimes if I don't have at least social media, I don't have any social interaction, like any kind of
Right.
interaction, right? And so I realized I kind of went back to it, but I'm just kind of taking a new approach of I really just had to kind of flip my own script mentally of just keep scrolling,
Mm.
like Nemo with the fish, right? Instead of swimming, just keep scrolling.
Yeah.
And then I kind of have this catchphrase of my mind of be a creator, not a consumer.
Oh, I like
You and
that.
I have so much knowledge that, put the good stuff out there instead of just scrolling and taking and consuming all of the other junk that's out there.
Yeah. No, that's great. Be a creator, not a consumer. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to go through that. Funny enough, when I first moved to Alpine, um, I had realized that and I think it was somebody posted something there. It wasn't like my own original thought that triggered this, but somebody had put something on social media and I was like, "Oh, that's me." And it was this same concept of like all I'm doing when I'm on Instagram and TikTok wasn't even out yet was just comparing myself to everybody else. And I was blocking my creativity because I was so concerned that what I was putting out was not good enough and it wasn't what somebody else was doing. And I didn't look the right way. I didn't have the right setting. I didn't have this, da 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 da. And I finally went through and I just started unfollowing people. Like anytime I saw a post that made me feel bad about myself or made me feel ashamed or made me feel I wasn't good enough, I was like, nope, unfollow. See you later. Um, and I actually had this person who is no longer my friend. Speaking of friendships, sometimes we should do an episode on losing friends as well, because that is a thing.
Yeah.
Um, we had this falling out, and in hindsight, it was the best thing for me. Um, but I remember I put something out on my business profile about this experience, and I was like, "Hey, if you're going through this, like this felt really good for me, like you should do the same thing. Like unfollow these people. They're not bringing joy to your life. Let them go." And this person reached out to me and they're like, "That's so dumb. You just kind of have to get over it. And like, that's, use it as inspiration." And I'm like, okay, thank you for your unsolicited input. And also, no, like, here,
You
that's,
are now unfollowed too.
yeah, right. And it's like, it doesn't work for everybody. And some people have that ability. They can just look at something and be completely unbothered by it. And like, awesome. High five, keep crushing it. Then there's other people who are like, no, we're easily, or not easily, subconsciously manipulated or
Hmm.
brought into this spiral of like, oh, I'm not good at X, Y, and Z, or I'm not good enough. Um, yeah,
And this, yeah, other contexts in our life are triggering us to be more sensitive and be more like, when you think about a red car, then you see red cars, right?
yeah,
So when you get on social media, when you're thinking about your insecurities, that's what you see and that's what you're drawn to, no matter what else is out there. So yeah, it does help to unfollow because then, those algorithms, they play with you. So whatever you've scrolled past or liked or commented on or done, like clicked on, you're going to continue to see. So if you don't unfollow them, then it just continues to perpetuate the problem.
yeah. And man, are they fast. I was looking at nootropics yesterday or 2 days ago, and literally like 2 hours later, it was on my suggested stuff and it was in my YouTube, and I was like, what? Like I just Googled this like 2 days ago or 2 hours ago. And it's
Yeah.
wild how fast that stuff is working. It's scary, actually. Let's not
And you
talk
don't
about
even
that.
have to
I'll
look
be
it up.
afraid.
Now you've said it, and my phone heard
Right?
you, and now it's going to be on my phone.
You're gonna get advertised for
Yeah.
nootropics, which you should. I mean, they're great. Adaptogens are amazing. I'm a big fan. Everyone should be
Yeah.
taking them. Um,
Yeah.
man, yeah. But that's cool. I like that. I like that you're finding that balance of social media and what works for you. And it's not just the extreme of like, no, can't have it at all. It's like, no, I can, but just how and in what way? Like you're bringing that power back to yourself of you're in charge of how you spend your time and you are in charge of how you use your social media. And that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
The
to follow
people
up,
that
you talked
created it would
about,
be so mad.
I know. You talked about that social media was the issue when you first moved to Alpine. Do you want to go back and talk about like kind of today what we want to talk about is what brought us to Alpine and kind of what happened and that we didn't expect to happen, right? Like I don't think either of
Yeah.
us ever had any desire to move to Alpine before we got
No.
there. And then it turned out to be this completely life-changing experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I will share my Alpine, how I got there, how I ended up in Alpine. So I had been to Alpine before I moved there. My father lives,
Wait, can I
well,
pause you real quick?
yeah.
Okay, so at the end of episode 1, we asked the
Oh,
audience,
that's
because the
right.
title of this episode is The Witch and the Sex Addict, and we asked the
Yes.
audience to guess which one of us was the witch and which one of us was the sex addict.
Oh my
And I
God,
love
my
that we're
mom
both wearing
listening is
black
going to be like,
today.
what? I know. It's my Alpine shirt, my
I know.
Desert Rose Provisions. But yes, I'm just thinking about like our parents listening to this episode and being like, what? One of you is what? Like, yeah, it's
I
gonna be great.
know.
I feel
I
like we
know.
should
I
just
told
hold it out as long as possible and not say anything.
Yeah, I shared with Heather before we got on screen today that I was so nervous about it. Like, I thought it was so exciting until we actually got here to do it. Now I'm like, I'm scared to death of who's going to hear
Like,
this.
Never mind, maybe we don't air this episode. We'll just talk
So
about
I
it and then
just,
put it in a bank.
yeah. So I just wanted to give the audience one more chance to try to guess which one of us is which before you get into your story, and they can then we
Yes.
share it.
Yeah, and I think we'll share our stories and I think from there you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Um so we'll just start with like how did we get to Alpine and then we can dig a little deeper. So again, my father had lived in Alpine for a while and so I had visited before I'd been there and Alpine was very much a vacation for me. Like that was just get out of town, be in the middle of nowhere, have, no contact with the outside world. And I loved it. I loved visiting. And then I was performing full time, dancing full time, choreographing full time. I was, just living the dream life of being a performer, and then COVID
Do you want to
happened.
clarify what kind of
Oh,
performer? Because when you say dancing and performing,
not that kind. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but no, I was in theater. So I spent my whole life doing contemporary, and I was a competitive dancer, and then got into contemporary. Was on a contemporary company for a while, and I've always taught dance. I've been a dance teacher since I was about 14. So over half my life now, I've been teaching dance, and um, I had moved around, so Seattle, Florida, back to Seattle, Georgia, just kind of all over the place. When I was in Georgia, I got into theater, and so I was performing. Did 3 seasons with the State Theater there, which was amazing. Just fell in love with it. Love acting, love singing, and I've done a little stuff with TV, film, and that kind of work. So pretty much anything that was either on stage or in front of a camera, I was like, yes, sign me up. Let's go. Um, and then, COVID happened and my industry very much just followed Broadway, right? So whatever Broadway was doing, that's what everybody else did. And so all of the dance studios and all of, because New York did this shift, so all the dance studios, we went online. And we just thought, well, we'll just teach online for, this short term period
couple of
of
weeks.
COVID. Yeah, it'll be
Yeah.
so fine. It'll be fine. Um, and I did that and I shifted to teaching online. And honestly, I loved it. I had such a great time sharing dance with the whole world. And just giving that out to the community and being like, here you go. Like you can take class with me and you can learn. And it was beautiful. And I felt like our community really came together. And just had a great experience. And then teaching, like the studios that I was working at also offered online classes. So for a little while, I did get to keep my job and or one of my jobs. And and then I didn't, right? And then it just like COVID kept progressing and more our industry was really hurting because everyone else was really hurting and my industry is a luxury item. Like we are not a must have, we're not a necessity. And so because of that, as more and more people were hurting, those kind of things started to be left behind. And so um we're all of us basically out of jobs. And so my dad reached out and he's like, well, just come stay with me for a few months. He's like, if you're still teaching classes online, you can do that here. And by that time I wasn't, the studios had all shut down. And so I was running some online classes via this company called Moxie. And that was kind of fun. I was putting out YouTube videos and whatever, and moved to Alpine with my ex. And he was, oh my God, I just blanked on what he does for a living. Marketing. There we go. I'm like, he does something with people. So he's a branding and marketing design guy. And so he could work remotely. He was, could work with clients and whatever. So he's like, yeah, let's go to Alpine, Texas.
It'll be an
Um,
adventure.
yeah, exactly. It's like we'll work online and hang out and travel all over West Texas and we did for a while, and it was okay for a little bit because initially going down there was short term, right? There was an end to this. And
Mm.
then when it became very clear that there was no end, um, that's when I became very unsettled. That's when I was like, oh shit, I live in Alpine. Like, oh, that's happening.
I'm not just visiting anymore.
Yeah, I was like, I live here. This is okay. And it was honestly the single best thing that could have ever happened to me. It really, truly, hands down, was the hardest and most amazing time of my life so far were those 2.5, 3 years that I lived there. Um, yeah. And that's how I ended up in Alpine. Cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger.
Um, yeah. And well, I would love, we'll talk about like the relationship stuff, but how did you get to Alpine?
Yeah, very similar. COVID happened, and so many people think that COVID was this disaster, and I just see it as the greatest blessing that I ever received because
Okay.
it forced me to do things that I was probably too scared to do if I hadn't
Mm,
been forced to do them. And so I had been in a really tumultuous marriage. There's a whole backstory to that is beyond the scope of this episode, but it had been really tumultuous, and we had been separated and living apart. And I got let go from my job. They decided to reduce the workforce. So I wasn't fired, but my position was terminated, if that makes sense. But it was more painful than my relationship. Losing that job was more painful than my relationship because I had made my job my life. I had
right.
always felt like there was this hole inside of me, and I tried to fill it with the good girl things, right? Like I got married, I had the baby, I got the job, I got the degrees, I got the house, I got the car. I did all these things that society said you're supposed to do. And yet I still had this like deep aching hole inside of myself, and that never left. And so I tried to use my job to fill that hole. Like I just jumped headfirst into my job, and it was life. I would go at any day, any hour, anytime I was working, and I thought those people were my friends. Like we talked about last episode about who are your true friends. I thought those people were my friends. And then when I got let go, not only did I lose my job, but I also lost my social connection of my friendships as well. And there was some really hurtful things that happened. And so I had been sexually harassed. I had been sexually assaulted, and I had had gender discrimination. All of this stuff just piled up at once, in addition to having a really struggling marriage and that was failing. And so when they offered me the opportunity, a friend worked at Sul Ross State University in Alpine and said, "Hey, we have a job." I laughed first, and then I kind of looked around and I was like you, like, oh shit, I got nothing else to do. We're going to
Yeah.
Alpine, you know?
You're like, sure, I guess. Why not?
And this place is so far in the middle of nowhere. Like we talked about last episode, that the first time that I went and my cell phone picked up the Mexico phone
Yeah.
tower, and I didn't have a map and I didn't know where I was like, am I going to get arrested? Am I across the border?
You're
Am
like,
I in
wait, did
Mexico?
I
I don't
border
even
cross?
know. Yeah.
Don't remember going across water, but maybe.
Yeah. So I moved to this town that is 6 to 7 hours from anyone that I know. And I knew one person in the town, and that was the guy who, told me about the job. But he was married, he was a coach, he had a full time, like he was busy. He didn't, like we weren't really friends.
Right.
Um, and I didn't have a husband, I didn't have a child, and I didn't have an identity. Like, before I had left, I was a rodeo mom, and rodeo didn't even notice that COVID happened. So we had just been rodeoing nonstop all during COVID.
Oh, wow.
But I wasn't a rodeo mom anymore. I wasn't a mom anymore. In my previous job, I had been the fitness girl. I was always wearing the spandex girl, and so wasn't known as that either. So I lost my job, I lost my identity, I lost my family, and I got to Alpine and just sort of went, what now? Like I don't even know what to do. All I had when I moved there was I took an RV, and because no one believed that I would make it out there because they thought that it was too far outside my comfort zone. They didn't believe that I would make it. And then when I finally moved into a house, I literally had two lawn chairs and a cowhide. That's all I had to my possessions besides my clothes. That's literally all I
Yeah.
had.
Yeah, we almost lived
Um,
together. We actually, I forgot about that. We had looked
yeah.
at, like, our timing had lined up where I was looking for a place to live and you were looking for a place to live, and we had looked at that house out in Double Diamond, right? I think there was a house out there, and we were like, maybe we'll make this work. Yeah. How funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot going on to have all of that lead. It's funny because our stories are so similar, but at different timelines, right? Like you had all this stuff on the back end, and it's like the universe came in and was like, okay, you're done over here. So this is a shitstorm now, and I'm gonna push you this way.
Yeah.
And that's it kind of pushed you into Alpine. And I feel like, you know, I feel like I was ignoring the universe for so long, and I ended up in Alpine, and then there is where the universe was like, cool, I'm gonna make your shitstorm happen here, and you have nowhere to go. So
Yep.
just have to ride through this storm in this new town with no friends and you know nobody and good luck. And that's, yeah, that's what happened. And then we
That just gave me
met.
the best visual of me getting pushed in and you getting sucked in, right? Like it sort of
Yeah.
sucked you in.
This
Like
little
you
tornado
just
brought
think you're,
him.
yeah, you just think you're coming to visit, but really we're sucking you in to stay for a long time.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you got to Alpine and you what was kind of like the time period when it really hit you that you're like, oh, my life is different. Did that happen before you got there? And was that one of the reasons why you made that decision to say, yeah, I'll take this job? Or was it after you got there that everything kind of settled in? You're like, oh shit, like my whole life is different now.
I had gone through the like anger of the job loss because I had about a 6 month gap between losing my job and moving. And I sort of just took it as like devastation about the job first, but I kind of try to throw myself into being there for my son a little bit more. But he was a senior in high school. He was like rodeoing and he didn't need the homebody mom anymore, the stay-at-home mom anymore, right? And I was still trying to do that. And he was like, okay, but I gotta go. And so I had kind of gone through that and I'd gone back and forth with my ex about what we were going to do. And we really, like, that was part of the reason of going is that we were just sort of at this stall. And so it wasn't really till I got there that it hit that, like, you got nothing.
Yeah.
You really have nothing. And then it was still a little bit of COVID going on. So people were still wearing masks. My teaching
Right.
was really crazy. So it still wasn't really settled. So I didn't have a lot of time in probably the first 3 to 4 months to really like be too sad or too notice because I was trying to learn how to be a professor. I was trying to learn how to teach online. I was trying to learn how to teach in person. I was trying to figure out like all of this because like just chaos happened at my job, my new job as well. And so luckily it distracted me a little bit. And yeah, and then that's where the next part turns in, our
Yeah.
identifiers kind of comes
Yes.
in.
Um, okay. You want me to lead the way on this or you want to start with your story?
Either way. Either
Okay.
way. What do you think?
Um, hmm.
You want to do like a one, two,
I
three and
don't
just say the
know.
word, like say which one we are?
Sure. I like it. All right, you do the one, two, three, and we'll say it on
Okay, and
three
we're
or on well, no, on four because you'll be saying the word three. So duh. Say
yeah.
two words at the same time.
Okay, ready?
Okay.
Okay. Oh God, I'm nervous. A little bit sick of my stomach. Okay, ready? Here we go. Okay. One, two, three. Sex addict.
Witch.
Oh. Okay.
All right, it's out there. It
Okay. So
happened.
actually, you kind of gave me a funny segue because you were talking about your dad being in the gym, and when I moved to Alpine, I actually met your dad before I met you,
Yeah. Oh, I
and
remember that. Yes.
and
Yeah.
I remember being like, okay, is this a single guy? He's pretty muscular. And your dad, again, is very fit. So you can't really tell his age that much.
Yeah, he's a
And I'm,
good-looking guy, and he's strong, and he's just like 6'2", and yeah. I've
and
had
I'm like
more
smack,
than enough friends be like, "Man, your dad's hot." I'm like, I know.
and I'm like smack in the middle of y'all's ages, kind of like I'm older than you and younger than him. So I was just kind of right in
Yeah.
the middle. So I was like, wait, do I want to be friends with her or go on a date with him? I'm a little confused.
Which direction am I gonna go? Yeah, no, I remember that because I think my dad came up and told me about you. I know for a fact he did because he's like, hey, I just met this woman. She's a professor. And he's like, you should be friends with her and da 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 da. And I know my dad is a talker. Like, and I say this in such a nice way, Dad, if you're listening, I love you. Like he's this chameleon. He has this ability to be like a total recluse and like nobody talk to me. But when he wants to turn it on, he is a charming, I will talk your face off. I know everywhere there is to go. I know every person you need to know. So I can just like imagine his first interaction with you. He was probably like, she's beautiful. She works out. She's new in town. What's going on with your life?
Yeah. And again, to just keep explaining Alpine, like it's a really small town. There's really
Yes.
one gym, and you notice if there's a new person in town, and there's not
Oh,
that many
yeah.
single people in town. Like the
Yeah.
dating, did you ever? well, we talked. Oh, the other funny thing that we had happen besides that of like, am I going on a date with the dad or being friends with the daughter was we found out later on that we had matched with the same person on Bumble because again, when you use dating apps in Alpine, there's like one person in your area unless you make your
Yeah.
radius so big that you're getting people from Mexico.
Yes. I remember, so it's funny because Ryan and I now being together, when I moved out there and after I had broken up, so my ex and I were there and I broke up with him and, talk about that in a second. But I got on the dating apps for a moment and I was like, oh, girl, you're not in the city anymore. Like, we know all of these people, like, or I've seen them. And I immediately, like, I just left it all up there and I didn't close any of the accounts down. Um, Turns out Ryan was on one of the dating apps and like wanted to match with me, but because I never got back on, I never saw it. And so
Oh,
we like matched
that's
on this
funny.
thing 2 years before we ever even started dating. But yeah, I shut down those dating apps so fast because you have to expand your mileage to like freaking El Paso. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I am not driving to El Paso for anything, probably except for the airport, and especially not to like maybe meet somebody. Um, yeah, but yes, your Bumble match, that's a story. That is part of our journey today, actually.
Oh my gosh. Like
Whoa.
one of the most awkward moments in our friendship. And
Oh.
I was really nervous that it was going to ruin our friendship.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because it was
I'm glad it didn't.
because you and I had this interesting dynamic because we were so much alike that occasionally I would feel competition with you,
Oh no.
because not in a bad way, but,
Yeah,
kind of like you were talking about with
because we're
social
the
media,
only
that
two
comparison.
single women in the whole town. Is that what?
And fit, yeah, and fit people,
Yes.
right? So we kind of had the same circle and the same
Yes.
interests, and so it was easy to almost be like you were a real life social media. You're like the real life Instagram feed that I'm comparing myself to, even though there's like a decade between us. And so, yeah, it was such a weird experience because I got to Alpine and when the dust settled and I realized I had nothing, my addiction that I didn't really know was an addiction
Yeah.
came out and it really reared its ugly head. And I realized that I was still trying to fill this hole inside of me because, again, my degrees, my job, my marriage, my kid, my all the things that I had done had never filled it. And I was just like, it was like being hungry. And like, have you ever been craving something and you just keep eating and it doesn't ever satisfy the craving, right? And that's what this felt like to me. And I had tried to describe the hole to my ex, like probably really early on in our relationship, and he had no idea. He couldn't comprehend it, he didn't understand it, and so I felt weird talking about it, so I never brought it up again. But I still always had it in the back of my mind and knew it was there. So the only thing I could do was I was just seeking validation, I was seeking attention, I was seeking praise, all the things that I had not gotten from, now I know, my dad and my ex. And I just felt like I just needed this attention. So mine, they call it like sex and love addiction, and they can even have a validation aspect to it. And that was really more of mine, was not so much the act of sex itself, but the attraction and the build up and the chase, because it made me something exciting and it was able to distract me where I didn't have to talk about how sad I was or how lonely I was or how uncomfortable I was and in my own skin and all of this stuff. And so when I got to Alpine, I just sort of went a little haywire and crazy quite a bit. And I'd never been on dating apps before until I moved out there. And again, there's no one on dating apps and your choices are slim. And I distinctly remember you teasing me repeatedly about the vibe that I carried and the type of people that I attracted to me and like the way that people would come up to us or act around us when we
Yeah.
were out. Do you remember that?
Yes, especially the baseball games. I was like, damn, Shanna, like, yeah. But it makes sense though, because that was the energy you were putting out, right? So
Mhm.
then that's the response that you were getting. And like, of course, I mean, in hindsight, now that I know what I know about you and where our friendship is, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And like, it's funny because there were moments where, and this isn't necessarily like right at you, but kind of through my whole life, I've always been the person where I'm like, I'm not the friend that gets hit on. Like if I'm out with friends, I am not the girl that people are buying drinks for, people aren't coming up to me and asking me to dance. And like for whatever that reason might be, it could be because I keep saying that, who knows. Um, but I was never that person. And so throughout my whole life, I've always had moments with all of my girlfriends where I'm like, well, why not me? You know, like why didn't I get hit on? So I guess maybe that same thing. I guess I didn't realize I was doing that too, where I wasn't thinking of it as a competitive thing, but it would be where we'd have these moments or like these instances where you would get hit on or somebody would come up to you and I was like, okay, I get it. Like she's gorgeous, but hi, like why am I not being hit on? But the funny thing is, at that time in my life, that's not what I was wanting, right? Like I was in the opposite place where I was like, I'm I need to figure out my own shit because I am a fucking mess. Like and I just knew like from my last relationship, I was like, okay, something's wrong because I keep making these same relationship mistakes. I keep dating the same person in new skin. I keep getting to the same place in every relationship. So clearly there's something internally that I'm doing. But yeah, so I can see why like my energy out was like, don't talk to me. Like I'm not interested. And your energy was like, everybody come talk to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you say that, but you are drop dead gorgeous. But I think you're a little bit intimidating because you are so tall and you have these like graceful long arms and legs. And you do kind of have this like, don't mess with me
I know my
face at
resting
that
bitch
point, right?
face.
Like
Oh, I
at
still have
that
it. My
point,
resting
right?
bitch face is huge.
But I don't think I wouldn't even call it resting bitch face of just, it comes across as this extreme confidence is how it looks from the outside, right? Like, I know what I want. You're not it.
Yeah.
It's kind of what it looks like.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my energy was so funny because it would even translate to social media. And I didn't even realize that, again, that I was doing it. But I was getting messages from like some of my son's like dad friends
Oh, I
hitting on
remember
me who were
this.
married. And I
Yeah.
was like, what is happening right now? But since I got with Will, all of that has stopped. That was the
Yeah.
craziest thing. I remember one day being like, Will, I don't get these weird, crazy ass messages anymore. Like, even before I started posting about him on social media, because I didn't post about him for a long time.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
true. I mean, what we're asking for, either verbally or subconsciously or energetically, the universe is like, okay, here you go. Like, whatever happens, happens. Good luck with this.
yeah. The law of
Um,
attraction is a real thing.
oh yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. That is something, again, I'll have to add that to our episode list of things to talk about. But yeah, I think so you had this moment of coming into Alpine and where you knew instinctively like somewhere deep inside that there was this thing kind of your whole life, but it didn't really manifest into something that you could label until you got to Alpine and there was nothing else to distract you from it, right? Like
Mhm.
there was nothing else pulling you away. You didn't have to go be full-time mom. You didn't have to go be a wife. You weren't working full-time at that other school. You didn't have that big uproar happening with the other school. There was no distractions. And so all of a sudden that thing that's probably always been there was like, hey, and you're like,
Yep.
oh, okay, we gotta talk about this. Um, yeah, I think that's I want to talk about like where that led you with once you started to learn what was happening, or was it the path of did you have a moment where you're like, okay, this isn't really what I want, and is that what led you down a path of change or healing or whatever, that journey looked like for you? Like which one happened first? The journey of healing or the realization of what was happening?
Well, I started doing therapy and I found a therapist and her name was Susan, which is my mom's name. So it cracked me up always. And she and I had the same birthday. And I was like, this is
Oh,
too
weird.
weird. Yeah. And she and I had started working together and kind of working through my issues because I would just be like face first in the floor bawling, just because I was doing these things that I knew would only be like a short term fix, right? Like getting drunk, short term fix, and then you feel like crap the next day, right? The hangover. So it was kind of the same thing. I would go chase this attention from men, and it would make me feel good for about 5 minutes. And then when it was over and they left me, I felt even worse, right?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't actually choosing them for relationships or for good reasons, right? I was just seeking this quick fix of give me some attention, make me feel pretty, and make me feel validated. And so it was just so counterproductive, right? Like I knew it was wrong, but I kept doing it anyway. And so
Yeah.
that's when I discovered, though it was kind of a the perfect moment of I just happened to be downloading a book on Audible, and I found The Secret Life of a Hollywood Sex Addict. And
Hmm.
it just sounded interesting to me because I kind of like that racy stuff. Like, I've always loved sex. It's weird. Like, I remember listening to Dr. Ruth when I was a small child and thinking this was so fascinating, right? And then Dr. Drew came along and had his
Oh
sex
yeah.
talk show, right? And I've always just been fascinated by sex, and I've never been ashamed to talk about it. And I teach about it, and my students will be like, "Why are we learning about sex in college?" Like, I'm like,
Because you're
because
all
no
grown
one
up now.
talks about it, and we need to, right? We need to be talking
Yeah.
about it. And so it was really interesting that how it manifested, that my interest of my whole life manifested this way. But I listened to this book and I went, oh, geez, maybe I'm a sex addict. Like, I
No,
never even knew that was a
interesting.
thing. And you kind of think when you hear the word sex addict of that, like, sleazy guy who's just saying that to be able to cheat on his wife, right? And
Right.
it's all about sex. And so I read the book and I talked to Susan about it. And she was like, actually, I was going to bring that up to you. And so we just hit this
Interesting.
moment at the same time, and she helped me find a recovery group. And so that was the big changing point for me, was realizing, like, when I got into these groups and realized that other people had the hole, I was like, oh my God, these are my people. These
Yeah.
are my people. I am not the only one in the world that had the black hole inside of them. And when someone said it before I even brought it up, I just immediately felt this huge weight come off my shoulders, because I'm kind of that label person. Like, when you can label something for me, when I can identify it, like, then I can be like, oh, that's what it is. Okay, I can navigate this now.
Right.
Like, I was
Yeah.
going through grief for a while, and I didn't recognize it as grief. And when my counselor was like, Shanna, you're grieving. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. That makes
That makes
sense.
sense.
Now I feel much better. Okay, got it. I'm not just crazy.
Yeah.
And yeah, so these recovery groups, it's called SLAA, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, and they follow the big book that Alcoholics Anonymous uses, the Big Blue
Mhm.
Book, and they do a 12-step recovery program, and they have regular meetings that you can attend, just like going to an AA group. And one of the best things that came out of it was I found this group called Spiritual Gangsters, and they were awesome. And it was just this group that met every day, and we would have regular meetings. We would do affirmations, we would do journaling together, we would just all this stuff. It was so cool. But really, going through the 12-step program, I kind of think is something everybody should do, whether you think you have an addiction or not. It was just the most enlightening experience. And it's really almost like a religious experience, because the first thing is believing in a higher power, whatever that higher power is to you. It doesn't have to be Christianity or God, but whatever your higher power is. And man, it was powerful.
Yeah. The 12 steps is like, I I can go on and on, but I think it's such, I agree. I think everybody should do it or some form of it, or at least look at it and be, it
Hmm.
is not this taboo thing that's like, oh, you do the 12 steps, or like you're in AA or you're in some type of addiction. It's like, yeah, and you should probably also do this work. Like, it is so healing, and it's so,
Yes.
I think the biggest thing about the 12 steps, and I shouldn't say the biggest thing, one of my biggest takeaways when I learned about it was the ownership that you have to take and the responsibility that you have to take for yourself. In
Hmm.
every facet of your life, you are responsible. You don't get to blame other people. You don't get to make excuses. You have to be the one to be like, "Oh yeah, I did that, or this thing happened because of something that I did in some form or fashion." And just have to be okay with that and own up to it. If it was wrong or, hurt somebody, I have to apologize for that. And I have to just sit with that. And I don't have to get an apology in return. Yeah. So just that ownership of self, I think, is something that we as a society miss out on so much. And we're so quick to label and blame and be like, oh, well, this happened to me when I was a little kid, and that happened to me yesterday, and so did this. And because of all those things, like you said, the sleazy guy who's cheating on his wife and uses, sex addiction as an excuse. It's like, no, no, you are responsible for your choices. Yes, you might
Hmm.
have an addiction, but that is your responsibility to go do something about it. It is not the addiction's fault, right? Like, that's on you. You have to change, or work towards that, or whatever that might be for you. So yeah, totally agree. I think the 12 steps are amazing.
And getting out of that victim mentality of, yeah, something bad might have happened to you, but that doesn't give you an excuse to do bad.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
like you had a childhood trauma, like, okay, but now what are you
We
going to do
all
about
we
it?
all
Right.
did.
Yeah, we all did. Yeah.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. So let's go back now and tell me more about what happened to your storm in Alpine. So mine happened before I got there. You came in thinking you're just on vacation. And
Yeah,
then what happened?
exactly. Yeah, so I came in and when it really dawned on me that like, COVID was going to be seemingly forever at some point, um I realized how much I was scrambling to distract myself from myself. And so I was seeking out any job that I could find. There was a studio that I worked with in Georgia, and I was just saying, even though I didn't really want to, I was saying yes because I was like, it's something, give me something, give me something, give me something. And those things, everything fell through. Everything on my plate in one way or another was, fizzled out or fell through or just didn't happen. And so what ended up happening is my ex and I, he had a lot of his own stuff going on and he needed to work on that and he wasn't. And so then that became my focus, right? So then he was my thing where I was like, well, I will fix you. Like you are my new project because I have nothing else to do. And that's never a good idea.
No,
Um,
I'm sure he
so
loved that.
yeah, he was really happy. Obviously, it was a really healthy time for him. Um, so so that relationship ended, for quite a few reasons. And I think a big part of it was that I realized that I wasn't in love with this person. I loved their potential. I loved what I thought that he could be. And then when he became that project for me, it was even worse when he couldn't meet my high expectations, right? And that's not on him. Like that's on me for setting this unrealistic bar of what I thought he could be or should be, and then trying to make him do that. Um, so that relationship ended. He leaves Alpine, and I was forced to be still. Like for the first time in my entire life, I was still. From the as long as I can remember, I have been going to school and sports and dance and rehearsal and homework. So my parents were divorced. So I was dad's house, mom's house. My sister has this thing and going and going and going and going. Chose a career in the performing arts, which means you are working probably 2 or 3 other part-time jobs and then staying up late and doing your other job and then being in my 20s and trying to find friends and living in the cities. And I mean, just never in my life had I just been still. Outside of the 1 or 2 yoga classes that I had taken. And from back in my early days, let's go all the way back to childhood. A little bit of a similar feeling, like you would describe it as like you had this hole, this thing that needed to be filled. And for me, it was more like a tug. Like something was always tugging me. I always had this pull towards something. And I never allowed myself to admit, whether it was from embarrassment or whatever, or thinking that people think I was stupid or silly, that tug was energetically driven to the universe. Like I was being pulled and called to work in, let's call it being a witch, and some form of deeper connection to everybody, to people, to the planet, to animals. I always had this thing that I was like, I am meant to be touching life. I am meant to be connected to life in a bigger way. And I lost that. I lost that. And I realized that I used performing arts as my way of touching people. And
Okay.
same way that became consumed with your job, right? Like that was your identity. Same thing for me. Being a dancer was my identity. Being a performer was everything. And it was my way of thinking that I was found the end of that rope, that thing that was pulling me and tugging me. And when I was on stage, that was it. That's where I needed to be. And in some degrees, yes, like I still believe that to be true, but I realized when all of that was stripped away and I didn't have that and I didn't have a project and I didn't have somebody to touch or work on or things to do, um, I just had to sit still, and I was completely shocked at how much I was seeking gratification outside, how much I was seeking other people's approval of me, that I was doing the right thing, or I was, I was the right size, I looked the right way, I was doing the right job. I was a dancer because everyone expected me to be a dancer. And um when that was all kind of stripped away, I was like, all right, well, I guess since I'm being still, I'll just meditate. And like I don't really know like what I the actually that's not true. I had met a woman in Georgia who I'd worked with, and she is this phenomenal person who introduced me to Ayurveda and yoga, and taught me yoga, and introduced me to a lot of meditation. And I had learned about being mindful years before that. Like before mindfulness was trendy, somebody had told me about it. And so I kind of drew on all those things that I had put in the back burner. And I was like, all right, well, maybe I do this. Like maybe I get to spend my time like exploring this tug and exploring what all this stuff is. And it literally, it was exactly what I needed. I reconnected with myself. I reconnected with my spirituality. I grew up a Christian. I grew up in the church. I left just because I had some bad experiences with the people.
Mhm.
And then I went on this religious journey and read books on religion, and tried to learn everything I could about different religions and absorb all of that. And I found a lot of things that just didn't sit right with my understanding, right? Like I was like, but I don't get it. I need the why. Like, why is that happening? And why does this religion have the same thing that that religion has? And why are these things like none of this stuff matches? And then I found Buddhism, and I am not a Buddhist, but there was a lot of things about Buddhism that really aligned with my belief around the selflessness, right? And letting go of self and dropping the ego, and similar stuff to the 12 steps. Like, cool, I just have
Mhm.
to, everything just is, and I'm just going to let things be. And I have no control over what somebody else is going to do. I only have control over me. And so when I was able to sit with all of that stuff that had been building back here my whole life, I finally was like, oh my gosh, this is the thing that I am. Like, duh. Like, yes, I love astrology. And yes, I read tarot cards. And yes, I believe in all of this spiritual woo woo hippie things. And it was just this odd, like, breaking moment for me where I was like, duh, like this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. Um, and it totally changed like my outlook on who I wanted to be. And through that, um, I allowed myself that space of being like, okay, like I'm going to be single in Alpine, right? Like I'm not going to be in a relationship here. I'm going to dig into all these other things. And
Which was one of our big differences.
yeah.
I remember distinctly sitting at the coffee shop with you and being like, I'm so lonely. I am going to be in a relationship.
Yeah,
And you were
he
just the
was
opposite.
opposite. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I remember, and it's funny because my distinct thought to myself was like, I want to make girlfriends. Like I had that conversation. Wrote it in my freaking journal. I was like, I need female friends. I'd always been in a relationship. I had always been surrounded by men. I had always had men as friends. And I was never the girl friend. And so I made this like adamant self-proclamation that I was like, I'm going to seek out female friends. Like I want women in my life. I want strong women. I want women who, have their shit together, or at least are trying. And that's what I did. And like you've mentioned a few times, like I was the cultivator of events. And that's where that stemmed from, is because I wanted to be surrounded with people that were like-minded, with people that would just fill my cup in a way that wasn't relationships, because that's what I had always done. I had always used guys to fill my cup. And
Mhm.
I finally started to learn to fill my own cup and realize how important spirituality was to me. Um, and then the universe was like, cool, here's a little test. Here's a little Here's a little moment. Are you like, I really feel that the universe looked at me and was like, you're killing it. Like you were doing a good job. And obviously like I always wanted to be in a relationship. Like I wanted to have a lifelong partner. And they tested me. The universe was like, here's a little sprinkle of this human. And I was like, okay. Now mind you, my first experience with this human was terrible. Terrible. Um, so much so that I blocked them, deleted them from my phone. I was like, don't ever fucking talk to me again. And this was before we ever dated. This was them as a quote unquote friend. Um, Come to find out, they were struggling with their own demons and their own shit. And their story is not mine to tell, but they had a lot going on. I would say probably maybe 6, 7 months after we had this fallout, they came back to me and they reached out and I forget how they maybe saw me at the gym or something. I'm trying to remember how they contacted me, but um oh no, it was over the phone. So I guess I had unblocked them at this point and they called me and I remember having this conversation and they started going down a road into a topic that was something I did not want to discuss with them. And I sat there and I was like, look, if this is so important to you that it's going to determine whether or not we can be friends, I guess we cannot be friends because I don't want to talk about this. So if that is the thing that's always going to come up and it's always going to be an issue, I don't want to do it. And they were like, no, it's no big deal. We can move past this. That was a fucking lie. But so anyways, long story, long, they come back
Yeah.
and we started to be friends and you and he started to be friends. And all of a sudden the three of us are friends and everyone's hanging out. And I started to develop feelings for this person. And my mind, you were talking about earlier, I assumed that you and he were a thing, like, or you liked each other or flirted because you had matched and it was the baseball game. Like he came up and like started
Yes.
talking with us, but I felt like he was giving you a lot more attention than me. And I was like,
And I
okay,
felt
like,
like it was the other way around.
and
Yeah,
so in my mind,
it
I
was
was like, I
so
guess
awkward.
we're not going to be dating because this person likes Shanna. Like, fine. But, and so he called me that night after the baseball game and was like, what happened? What's going on? Why, like, what was that? And I was like, we hadn't done anything that would be remotely past friendship, right? And I was like, well, can you just come over? So he comes over to my house and I was like, look, if you have feelings for Shanna, like that's fine. But I don't think the three of us can all hang out together then because I was like, I also have feelings for you. And in this moment, my little happy heart like died because he just asked if he could kiss me and kiss me. And so then, the whole world exploded. And I was thinking the universe had sent me this amazing human being to be my partner. Um,
In fact, it
yeah,
had not.
no, I did not.
I was actually just telling my son the same thing yesterday that, like, when you're doing good, the universe likes to test you a little bit.
It
Like, do you
does.
really want what you said you wanted? Let's see how
Hmm.
bad you actually want that. Let's
And
let's
I
play with you a little bit.
and I think it's like little tests that it's like if you're asking for something that you aren't quite aligned with, right? Like if you're not quite there, it'll send you something and be like, this hits a lot of your boxes, but not all your boxes. Are you going to sacrifice this so that you can get
Mhm.
this thing that's higher? And if not, basically like, okay, good luck. Like, but if you are willing
Yeah.
to sacrifice that thing, and if you are willing, in hindsight, I look back and like coulda, woulda, shoulda, but it's like I was not emotionally ready to be in a relationship either. Like for all of the shitstorm that our relationship was and all of the faults that do lie with him, there are still plenty of faults that lie with me. And one of the biggest ones is I was not ready, but I wasn't aware of not being ready. I was so blinded by the butterflies and the excitement and the thrill of it all that I didn't actually sit and look at my list and go, this person isn't all of the things that I want. Like it's some of the things that I want, but not all of
I
them. So
had the same
yeah.
thing. Yeah. So my test was, here's this guy that checks all your boxes and should be your perfect relationship person. But what did I do? I chased him with physical attraction. And I thought, this is my guy, right? Like he checks all the boxes. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Cowboy, muscular, fit, like all the things, right? Like, um, and just chased that man right away.
He was
Like,
like,
because
oh,
I was like trying to solve my addiction with a relationship, right? And so I was
yeah.
like, oh, here, come play with me in my addiction, but also be in a relationship with me. And it doesn't really work that way. Yeah. So the
Yeah,
universe was like,
exactly.
hey, can you actually have a relationship, or are you just going to have an attraction?
Yeah. Oh, I love
And I
that.
didn't know that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's funny because like there's no shame on either of us for doing these things. It's like we didn't know. You don't know what you don't know till you know it, right? And I think that therapy is such a huge piece of this puzzle, in both of our stories, that ability to have somebody else help us navigate and get to places that we wouldn't otherwise see without them. And through my relationship with this person, like I thought I was crazy. Like I legit thought I was losing my fucking mind. I thought that I was a crazy person. And I am not going to label my ex, but there was a lot of gaslighting and manipulation inside of our relationship, whether it was intentional or not. It existed there. And because of that, and because I am a people pleaser, and because I am a fixer, I ended up spending so much of my time going, what is wrong with me? Why
Hmm.
am I not good enough? What did I do? How can I fix it? And what a selfish view, but at the same time, again, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. But in that moment, it's like those are all the things that the universe that I had always done in every relationship. And this person was just gasoline to my fire, right? So if this was like a little flame that I kind of always had in every relationship where I was always a little bit of a people pleaser and I was always a little bit of like, are you mad at me? And like, don't leave me. And I was a little clingy. This person was just gasoline. And so that little bitty part of me that was scared of abandonment, which is what it comes down to, is I have a fear of abandonment, was like, I mean, just up in flames. Like the whole, as big of a fire as you could ever hope that it would be, happened with this human being. And I am so grateful. I am so
Hmm.
grateful for every time that I was, broken up with from this person, every time that I drove a Thanksgiving somewhere else because it was always like Thanksgiving or Halloween for some reason. And every time that I was like sobbing on my kitchen floor or crying in my bathroom or going for a drive to like fucking Terlingua because I just needed to go anywhere. Um,
Yep.
like without that horrible experience, I would not be in this healthy relationship that I'm in right now. And
Same.
that is what I think that Alpine gave me. It's like, hey, you need to be still. You need to figure out who you are. By the way, you're a witchy healer girl, and like you have energy to like help people. And so you need to be in a place of coaching and leading and in healing and spirituality. Also, your relationship sucks with yourself, so you need to fix that. And I was like, no, I don't. And they're like, cool, date this person. And I was like, oh, yes, I do. I gotta fix that. And my therapy, I think you did uh CBT, right? For your
Hmm.
you and I did EMDR. Um and that, oh my goodness, I tried CBT, I tried a couple therapists and it just felt to me like no,
Cognitive behavioral therapy, just for anybody who doesn't
oh
know what
yes,
CBT is.
sorry. Um and I feel like when I was doing that work and in hindsight it's like, oh, it's because I just wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't ready to hear what my therapist was telling me and my therapist was telling me like it sounds like this person might be a little narcissistic. It sounds like you probably need to deal with some of your abandonment issues. It sounds like they were saying all of the things. And I was like, no, 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 that's not it. Like, like, something's wrong with me. I need you to fix me.
I have Googled
There's,
this and I know what
yeah.
it is. Diagnose myself. Thank you.
And it just felt like, I remember I had one therapist who, again, in hindsight, I'm like, oh, shit, like poor guy, like he was right. But I remember he would tell me things and I was like offended because he would like speak negatively about my now ex. And I was like, no, like I was defensive over this person who is
Hmm.
unintentionally, hopefully, ruining me. And then when I went through EMDR, like there's none of that in EMDR. They're not
So
asking
I've
you
never,
about,
okay, so explain to people what EMDR is because I
yes.
haven't, I've looked into it, but I haven't ever done it.
So EMDR is let me make sure I get this correctly. Eye movement. Hmm. I'm going to say it wrong. Let me Google it so I don't say it wrong. I always mess up the last two words because I've heard it both ways.
Yeah.
Um, So let me
But
get
talking about
this.
therapists, I love one of the things that I loved about our friendship is we could openly say, I went to therapy today, or my therapist said. And in
Yeah.
a lot of circles and in a lot of situations, that is very awkwardly uncomfortable. And people
Yeah.
just sort of like kind of go and back away and the conversation ends. And I've really been working on trying to say that in front of my son and in front of my significant other. And that was actually
Yeah.
one of the things about him, that he had gone to counseling on his own before he met me too.
Oh, that's
And we had
huge.
both done work, which is huge. But yeah, and so kind of coming back while full circle, like what I found out my whole was, thanks to the 12 steps, was that I needed, you talked about you found your spiritual connection. Mine ended up being my Christianity. I needed a better connection to God, and he had like stripped all my titles away. So like you said, I could only be Shanna.
Yeah.
I couldn't be all these other things that I had labeled myself as or identified myself as. And my relationship with him is the only thing that's ever filled the hole. Nothing else would ever do it. So not only did I identify it, but I figured out how to fill it up. And I can even tell now, like, some of the work that I have to do to maintain it, because it is an addiction. And so while therapy helps and you can do other things, I know, like, and I've even told Will, like, okay, listen, if I start acting a little croquet, you need to be like, Shanna, have you journaled today? Have you read
Yeah.
your Bible today? Have you prayed today? Have you drank your water and moved your body? Because these are the practices that I have to do on a daily basis to keep
Yeah.
myself consistent and level, and not that seeking, like, if I let that hole get too empty, if I don't refill it, like it's still
Yeah.
there. I've just got it filled up now. Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
love that.
what
I
did
love
you
that you have a partner that's like checking in on you to be like, hey, I need you to do these things. And you're like, oh yeah, this is how I stay who I am.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay,
yeah,
so did you
that's
find
great.
EMDR?
Yeah, so I was right.
Okay.
I was like, I think it's desensitization. So it's eye
Yeah.
movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. And so
Yes.
essentially what's going on here, and there's a lot of theory work out there too, like if anyone's familiar with the polyvagal theory, anything that has to do with like the nervous system, the eyes, and the ability to tapping is a huge part of EMDR, and tapping's becoming very trendy. I see it all the time on TikTok now.
Mhm.
um the
Just
binaural beats, like anything that's lateral movement side to side in the body. And basically what it does is you go in and you work with your therapist, and my therapist was amazing, and I will put a link to her company in the show notes, just because they have an app that you can go online and use, and it's just wonderful. um but it basically allows you to go through the trauma in a conscious in way, so that you are aware of your surroundings, you feel safe in your setting. um and you kind of have this dual, like your conscious and subconscious are like, I feel like it's going at the same time, and you go through your trauma. um and you reprocess it with different ways. So it could be like, my therapist is really great about using inner child work, because that's what I needed. It came to root that I had a lot of suppressed stuff from my youth that I had just shut down. And some signs of that were like, I don't have a lot of memories of my childhood, and that was just a protective mechanism that my brain went into. It was like, oh, you don't even remember all of this. So things like that I had to kind of dig deep into and approach that as the grown up that I am now. Right. And like, instead of just only viewing it through the subconscious mind or a memory where you really dive in and you're there, and like whatever part of you experienced it also is just the only part of you that's experiencing it. This allows you to experience it as that newer self. And I'm sorry to any EMDR therapist who just heard me explain that. I was like, no, that's not right. That was my personal experience. I'll say that. Like
yeah. There you go.
that was how it felt for me. There's a lot of somatic, stress and or de-stress that happens. There's a lot of just relief. And I remember the first session I had, I walked away, and the only way I could describe it was like, I felt like sand was just kind of settling in my body. Like, you pick up beach sand
Mhm.
and it just like easily like trickles out. That's what it felt like. It felt like sand had been clumped everywhere. And we finally got to this, but it was just settled. And I was like, and it
Okay, so
was,
I have a meditation that I lead for other people about that, very about sand, and oh,
oh,
it's
really?
my favorite. Yeah, like I have
Oh, how
people like imagine
cool.
that they're laying on the beach and then you're covered in sand, and as you breathe, the sand slowly trickles off and you feel lighter
Oh
and
my
lighter and lighter.
gosh. Yeah.
Yeah,
How funny is that? That's exactly what it felt like. Like,
I
I remember
know.
us walking home from her office, because again, y'all, this is Alpine. I could walk everywhere.
It's
Um,
so
and it was
small.
so small. And I just felt like, like just that was the only thing I could think of. I was like, oh, there's just sand, just like settling and like drifting somewhere. Um, yeah, and through that it was really cool. It was a lot of experiences, a lot of memories came up that I didn't have, that I had forgotten about, experiences that I was like, oh shit, like I forgot that happened. Um,
Mhm.
and through that work, I found my ability to set boundaries and my self-worth. And so
Yep.
I think Alpine kind of had twofold. It was like the stillness, the stripping away of labels. Who are you and what's important to you? What are your morals? What are your values? Where do you stand? And that's great. Those are kind of the pillars. And then it was the action. What are you going to do, or what was I going to do to take these things that I had now discovered about who I am and create a life based on that? And, easy step for me was like, oh, I was going to make a bunch of friends. Make a bunch of women friends. And I did. My favorite women on the planet so far in life are all from or in Alpine. Um, and then from there, the next piece was like, I wanted to be in a healthy relationship, but I didn't know what a healthy relationship was. I had
Mhm.
never experienced one. I had never seen one. I had never truly, and I shouldn't say that, because the relationships that I saw that were healthy for the couples that were in them were not what I wanted in a relationship, right? And
Mhm.
so it doesn't mean that they weren't healthy. It just wasn't what I wanted. Um, but I think most of the relationships that were close to my life were just bad. They were so unhealthy. They were toxic. They were, fighting and divorced and alcoholics. And I'm just bad experiences throughout my whole life. And so this final piece of my journey at that time, there's still a lot going on, but that final relationship opened up the door to me, for a lot of similar healing work where I felt like I had to find people that knew what it felt like to be going through what I was going through, right? I had to seek those people out and be like, hi, am I crazy? Like the same way you were like walking into the group, like, does anyone else feel this? And you're like, oh, everybody feels this in this space.
Yep.
I had this same thing. I remember I met one of my favorite people there, and she just kind of also very spiritual, yoga, all the things. And she really guided me, and she was like, hey, I want you to meet this person. And hey, I want you to go to this thing. And she really navigated it for me. And I found myself in an Al Anon group. And if you don't know about Al Anon, Al Anon is, I keep doing this. I keep hitting my screen and like our videos disappear. I don't know what I'm doing. Um, so Al Anon is a group for the loved ones of people who are alcoholics. Um, so they, it's a really fascinating place to be as a person who is either in a relationship with or a family member of, or a best friend of somebody who is an alcoholic, because you are constantly being faced with somebody that you know is a liar and a manipulator against their, like, to get to their own means. And please don't anybody take that as me labeling alcoholics as all liars and manipulators. That's not what I'm saying. But
No,
that
I
is,
actually identified myself because I was I'm an addict, right? So
yeah,
I can think about myself that when you said that, I was like, yeah, I did. I lied and manipulated
to get what you wanted.
to fill my hole. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
that's a big piece of it. And so as the person on the receiving end of that, when you realize that that's happening to you, but you still love and care about this person, it's a really tough place to be, because it's like, well, shit, what do I do? And everyone's like, don't enable, don't give in, don't do this. And, from the outside looking in, it's very easy to say those things. It's very easy to be like, well, just get out of that relationship or leave that friendship or don't talk to your mom anymore, or whatever the story might be. And it's like, that that's not always that simple. It's not always that black and white. And so anyways, walking into this group, and I only went to 2 meetings, but I remember sitting there, and this one person started to share their story.
Yours was face to face.
Yeah, it was an in-person meeting.
Okay. All
Um,
mine were on Zoom. So yeah.
I know I got lucky that this was like local. And so
Yeah.
local, in terms of West Texas local, which could be anywhere up to 3 to 4 hours away from where you live. Um, so yeah, it was an in-person meeting, and one of the people in the group started talking, and I mean, I could cry thinking about this. I swear to God, everything she said was my thoughts. Every
Mhm.
word that came out of her mouth, I was like, oh my God, like you read my journal, you're in my brain. What? Like, and I was sobbing and I didn't talk at either of the meetings I went to. I just listened. But I could not believe how reaffirming it was to be in a group of people and realize I wasn't alone. And by the way, I'm not crazy.
Yes. Yes. Okay, listen, yes. So I love it. You talked about like setting healthy boundaries, and you talked about like figuring out that you weren't alone. And those were the exact same pieces that I found too. And I love that we had these completely unique experiences at different points in our life, and we came through them, and even like through different types of therapy, through different types of recovery groups, and yet we still came to the same place of
Yeah.
realizing that we're not alone, we're not crazy, and how to be healthy.
Yes.
Oh, it just gives me chills thinking about like how I think that's what we're all looking for, right? Like a sense of belonging, and that shared experience and that shared story.
Yeah, and I think the sharedness too of that deeper stuff, like you said, when you talk to people about therapy and you kind of get that like, ugh, please don't share that with me. I think part of that is that people do want that to be shared, but they're not ready to give their part yet. They're not
Mhm.
ready to be that vulnerable. Even though they probably on a subconscious level want it. And the fact that you opened up to them is going to make them more likely to be like, oh yeah, I want to be friends with you. Like you are doing the work and yeah, I think you're right. Shared experience and more so than just shared experience of like the workout was hard today. As great as that is, and as important as that is to community as well, like it's not quite the same as recognizing that your internal thoughts and your internal dialogue that you think is just happening to you is happening to so many people. Like
Mhm.
so many people. And we could relate this to a lot of things, right? Like eating disorders. I've
Mhm.
had an eating disorder my whole life. I know what those thoughts are like. I know those labels that are happening. And so when you get around other people that can go, oh my God, me too. It's like, oh, thank God. Again, I'm not crazy. Like, I'm not broken. There's nothing wrong with me. Should I work on this and fix it? And is this who I want to be? I don't want to be that person. So yeah, I should work on it, but I'm not broken. Right. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's
And
so important.
in my spiritual gangsters groups, there were all kinds of addicts. So I had overeaters. There's an Overeaters Anonymous group,
Yeah.
so kind of along that spectrum. And then there were so many other people. And one of the things that I learned in doing some research about this is that most of the people who have an addiction have another comorbidity. And so usually, if you have one addiction, you likely either have another addiction or suffering from some sort of mental health disorder. So either anxiety or depression, or some kind of personality disorder. And I thought that that was really interesting, that it usually doesn't manifest as just that one thing. If there's one
Yeah.
thing, there's usually about 80% of the time, there's something else going on as well. And they have found that people that go into recovery, the success rate of recovery is pretty good. Like with AA groups, it's
Yeah.
usually about 75%, but don't expect it to be a quick fix. I feel like
Right.
mine probably, I thought that I was fixed faster than I was. And probably every addict ever, right? But average time is about 3 years for people to really
Yeah.
feel fully recovered from a serious addiction.
Yeah. And even then it's so again the work that you're doing and the work that, Will is helping you and supporting you with is like there are people who go through addictions of any kind and will relapse 10, 15, 20 years in. And it's like
Mhm.
they stop doing the work, right? Like
Mhm.
the AA saying is, it works if you work it.
Yeah.
Like if you stop working, if you stop doing these things, yeah, it's not going to work anymore. Like in any capacity, and especially in addiction, there is a piece of it that is outside of your control. There
Mhm.
is a piece of it that's like, if you stop working and you stop helping yourself, the brain's just going to be like, cool, I love this road that we used to drive all the time. Remember this road? We're going down it, right? And it's like, you got to keep those barriers up. And if those barriers come down, and it's the same thing with our bodies too. Like we all have patterns, we all have muscle memory, we all have these things that the body path of least resistance. What is easier? What
Yeah.
feels good, right? We love the things that feel good. And if we stop working towards protecting ourselves from those things that might feel good in the moment, but make you feel like trash later, then yeah, you're going to relapse in some way. And it's the same in relationships too. Like we could take this and remove the addiction side of it and even put it on like if I stop working on myself, if I stop
Mhm.
taking care of myself and I stop doing my spiritual work and I stop going to therapy and I stop working out, guess what? My relationship that I have right now that I love and is really, really healthy is going to fall apart.
Mhm.
And it's not because the relationship is inherently bad. It's because I'm not doing the things that keep me who I am, that keep me the person that he fell in love with. And then same goes for
Yeah.
him. He stops doing his shit too. I'm gonna be like, what? Like, who are you? What is this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to go back to what you said, the first step of the 12 steps is you have to admit that you're powerless over your
Yes.
addiction and that your life has become unmanageable. And so it goes back to that self-awareness of we have to be aware of ourselves. We have to know what's going on and what you said that you're powerless. And then that transparency, like, and that also ties into why I decided to give up social media because I realized that all I was talking to Will about was what's wrong with my body and why I'm sick.
Mm,
And like, who wants to be affectionate with someone who's always just complaining about their body and how sick they are? And so it was
yeah.
affecting my relationship. So it does, snowball, and one area of your health affects all areas of your health, which is why we want to be holistic and talk about all the different
Yes.
dimensions of it here in this podcast, because it you're not going to be perfect in all of them all of the time. And very rarely are you ever going to be perfect in all of them, right? It's always
Yeah.
going to be a give and take, but you've got to keep working the circle, right? You can't
Yes.
just be like, oh, I'm doing really good in this area and I'm sucking in this one. We're just going to hang out right here for a while, right? Because eventually then you'll start sucking in those areas that you're good at right now.
Yeah.
So you have to just keep pitching the ball back and forth like ping pong, you just have to keep batting it around.
Yeah, exactly. And it is a circle. I like that analogy because it's not, I think a lot of times we look at life as like maybe a triangle, right? Or a graph where it's like this bar has to be really, really high and like all the ones are little, but like no, it's a circle and everything's gonna come in and out of that center point and kind of, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, ping pong around. Yeah, I like that a lot. Um, yeah. Well, I mean, there we go. I identify, self-identify and work towards being a witch with all of my other relationship issues and uh my abandonment fears and all of that. And
Yeah, my validation issues manifested as a sex and love addiction.
yeah, thank
Yeah,
you for
and I'm
sharing
going to
that.
go to my
Like that's a hard
um,
thing I feel like to share and be open about. So thank you for
no, thank
sharing
you for
that
sharing
with
yours. Because I
me
remember the
and
first time you told me that, I kind of was like, "Oh, well, hold on, is that a real thing? Is that we're not talking like Bewitched, where you just like wiggle your
right,
nose?
not the Halloween
Like,
witch. We
yeah,
did have this conversation. You're right. Yeah. So, backstory, Shanna and I had spent a lot of nights after people left my house, just her and I continuing to drink wine and or talk until like 2 or 3 in the morning. And there was a lot of couch conversations, which also could have been the name of this podcast that we had.
yeah,
That like when we start talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, we did have this conversation. I forgot about
yeah."
that. But
I was calling it
yeah,
our woo woo shit. Yeah,
yes, my woo
let's talk
woo
about our woo
shit.
woo shit. Yeah,
Brian calls it that all the time. Anytime I like pull out any of my stuff, my crystals or my incense or my whatever, he's like, "Oh, you got all your woo woo stuff." Or he'll smell me and I'll have oils on, and he's like, "Oh, you smell woo woo."
yeah,
Like, yes,
because I
babe.
told you, yeah, my first experience with knowing anybody else that identified as a witch was a
Oh
crazy
my gosh,
experience.
yes! Please
Yeah.
share this story, y'all. This
Oh
is
my
not the type
gosh.
of witch that I am. Go.
Yeah, so I'm in doctoral school and we have to take a trip for class, and I'm working on my doctorate degree, and my I had to share a hotel room with one of my classmates. She's also working toward her doctorate, professional, works at a university, and we get to the hotel and she gets there before me, and when I get there she has incense and crystals and her witchcraft box and like a stack of books this big on the bedside table between our beds about witchcraft. And I'm like, okay. But then she
You
wants to
immediately like pull
do,
your holy water out and start like splashing it all over the room.
she wants to like make it a thing. And you can tell she's just trying to get attention and she wants me to ask her about her witchcraft. So I
Yeah.
keep avoiding it. And then lo and behold, the next day we get up to go to our first like event that we have to be at as students for this trip. And we all have to wear this matching bright purple shirt in Washington, D.C. We stand out like a sore thumb and we have to get on the subway in DC. And first of all, I'm a small town girl, little Texas girl, never been to DC before, never been on a subway before, do not know my way around, am terrible at directions. So we get lost, we get separated from the group. It's just she and we have to travel together. And we're obviously together. She pulls out a witch hat, like a Halloween witch hat, like the big black brim and the big black F
Yeah.
pointy top, like, and I have to be seen with her and I can't hide because we're dressed identically. Like, what is happening right now? I am scared that we are going to get mugged on the subway. Like, that's all I've seen on TV. So that's all I know. Yeah. So when Heather told me this, I was just like,
You're like,
mm,
not again.
hold on. Do I need to get out my cross? Like, what do we need to do here? But I love that I share so many ideals with you. Like, I am
Mhm.
not your normal Christian because I do believe, like, I love to read a horoscope. I love to read all of your signs, and I know, like, to know all the things. And one of my favorite traditions that you had when we lived in Alpine was everybody got to read the birthday book, right? I still talk about that to
Yeah.
people.
Love the
And
birthday book.
so, yeah, so it was cool that once I got over the initial shock of the label, that we could have a conversation about it, but it's kind of like that therapy thing that people are like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
yeah.
it's such a fun. I love that story, and I loved it even better because like 2 or 3 weeks later, you actually found the photo of your class, and the girl is wearing a witch hat, like a full on like Halloween riding a broom witch hat, and I was like, oh no, like that's. I
We are
mean,
taking like,
hey,
yeah, a sacred picture in the House of Congress, and we are all standing there. And at the last minute, she sneaks it out of her purse and puts it on when no one's looking. And so there's this beautiful picture of us, and none of us will share it or post it because of that.
because she's wearing her witch hat. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is and hey, if that's what floats your boat, like that is fine. That is, I like learning about and it's just hard because when I in the past I've toyed with like being like, "Oh, I'm a healer." And then like there's a totally different connotation when you use that word too. And it's like, it's not like I'm laying hands on people and like claiming to be Jesus, Like that's not what
Yeah.
I'm doing. But there's just this different element of how I think my spirituality manifests and what I'm intended to do with it. And I think that different people have different strengths, and some people's strengths lie more in a spiritual element or in a realm that's kind of outside the norm. And I feel like it's umbrella termed a lot as like witchcraft or, being a witch. And it's like, cool, I'm a witch. Like, I will own that shit. Like, yes, I will make you some type of like herbal something tea to help with some ailments that you have. And yes, I will mix oils for you. And yes, I think that crystals can do something for you. Probably not like save your life. Like, let's not get crazy. Um, but yeah, I don't own a witch hat yet.
Okay.
Maybe I'll buy one. Maybe I'll
Please
wear it for
don't.
the next episode.
Please don't. It might bring back some trauma for me. Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
it's true. Like, I think that we should stop being so afraid of that term or that identification, because I have friends that do like laser therapy type stuff, right?
Hmm.
Like and healing, and they claim that it will heal you, right? So if they can claim
Yeah.
that they can heal you, why can't you claim to be spiritual and to practice being in your realm? So I think
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah. And I know people too that like there's just experiences that I've had in my life and experiences that I've had with other people that are just inexplainable or unexplainable. Unexplainable is the word. That's the right word. And I look at it and like I they just are blessed in some different way. They have some type of strength that is different than what we in our society now deem as normal, right? And we only think that like, hey, it's normal if it falls in these tangible categories. If these things that I can hear and see and touch and validate through science. And now don't get me wrong, I love science and that's part
Mhm.
of our podcast, right? Like where's the research? Give me the facts. How did you get there? But I've also just experienced things where I'm like, I I don't know what to tell you. This person's a miracle worker, or like that experience that I had is not describable, or you can't put any research on that. It's just something that happened that I believe to be real or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, but
Yeah. So now you know the answer to the mystery of which one of us
yes.
is which. I do want to share, again, kind of going back to the science. If you do think that you could have addiction issues, we're going to put links in the show notes to some resources. Is actually a 40-question quiz to self identify. I talked about I liked quizzes to see if you could potentially be a sex and love addict. The 12 steps I think are helpful for everyone
Yeah.
to go through the 12-step program, and the Alcoholics Anonymous book, the big blue, what they call the big blue book, I think everyone should read.
Yeah.
It's impactful whether you think you are an addict or not. It just helps kind of like I believe the Bible is sort of a guide to just how to live a better life, right? And that's kind of how I
Mm.
feel about the AA book too, right? It's just a guide to live a better life. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to accomplish with this podcast, right? Like help you find ways through your soul, through your spirit, and through your well-being, and using a little bit of the research and the science and the self-awareness to figure out how to live your best life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you brought that up because it's true. It's like we have to be willing to look at things outside of our comfort zone. And when we start to talk about things like addiction or religion, people immediately are like, oh, like there's this, if you're not a Christian, you're like, oh, stop throwing the Bible around. Or if you are a Christian, it's like, no, nothing else is, you only read
Mm-hmm.
this. And it's like, no, 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 you have to bring all of this information in and then find what's right for you. You've got to pull in the resources and find the path that's right for you. And it's like, and some people, like, I know of people that are, who have gotten clean who don't go to AA, right? Like that might not be the right path for you. You still need to
Mm-hmm.
do work. Like there's still a path there. But yeah, we'll definitely put in, the 12 steps, that quiz. I love it. I love quizzes. I kind of want to take it too, just out of curiosity. I don't know, see what happens. Stay tuned.
We
Maybe
might
next
become.
episode I'll be like, it's also me.
Yeah.
And then also links for Al-Anon. So if any of you are loved ones of people who are addicts of any kind, Al-Anon is a great resource to just again get around people who have shared experiences and know what it's like to either share space with or help and support or set boundaries with people who are addicts of any kind. Um, and then I also want to put out there, like I think we'll put in the show notes too, is just a list of different ways that y'all can take care of yourself this week. And so we like to wrap this podcast up with something to do. Like last week or last podcast, it was, hey, go meet a friend. And then how did you meet that friend? Um, and I think one thing that would be really cool for us to know is what are y'all doing to help yourselves spiritually, emotionally, physically? What is your thing that you're doing? Is it therapy? Are you journaling? Are you in one of these groups? If it's anonymous, obviously keep that, whatever you need to do, but it'd be cool if you're like, I'm in some type of group. Do you meditate? Do you pray? And if you don't do any of those things, like is anything that we share today something that you're willing to try or look into? And reach out to us, ask us questions, shoot us an email, reach out to us on Instagram. We're happy to make suggestions and let y'all know what's worked for us. But I'll put a list of different ways that you can do that, and we'll just check in and hear your stories about what did you do this week to help yourself, mentally and spiritually, and how did that go?
Yeah. And we are here if you want to ask us about any of the assessments that we talked about or the quizzes that we like to take.
Yes.
I'm actually doing, it's actually one of my goals as a professor, kind of self awareness, is teaching critical thinking. Like you talked about, like you can
Mm,
be a Christian and still hear other perspectives and then critically analyze what works for you and what parts of that do you want to take and what parts don't you need. And so I'm going to challenge one of my college classes this semester to try meditation and then to read the
yeah.
research about meditation
Love
and then
that.
to form their final project will be that they will have to form their own critical analysis of, yeah, this worked for me, or no, it didn't, and here's what I believe about it based on the research and my own personal experience.
Oh, that's cool. We'll have to follow up with that afterwards and
Yeah,
share findings and how that went for everybody.
I've never tried it before. I'm super excited.
Yay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Well, that was now you know. Now you know the labels lie and who's who and our stories and you have a little bit more information of, you know, more stuff about this podcast. And what we're going to be
And
doing
know
with
that
it.
you are so much more than your label. So while we
Yes.
told you how we identified, that got us to the point where we are now, where we're happier and healthier, we don't identify as those titles necessarily. We just were able to find those pathways to get us to where we are on the other side of the
Yeah.
challenges.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Everything's just a journey. All right.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. So good to chat with you again. I'm excited.
I know.
All
Yeah.
right.
So we need to tease them about what we're going to talk about next episode.
Ooh. All
Do
right.
you have a little temptation for them?
No, you do it.
I know. I was trying to remember what we were going to talk about next.
Let's see. Let me pull
Um,
up our little list here.
yeah, that's what I was looking at too. Where do you want to go next?
Do we want to dive into, you want to do a little bit more like physical stuff, sciencey stuff about health and fitness?
Oh, yeah, let's go there because we haven't really talked about that much.
Yeah, we've done a little
Okay.
bit more relationship style things. So we've
Yeah.
got a couple options for, or like the scoop or sip. We could talk about supplements, pre-workout,
Mhm.
caffeine, how caffeine is, on the body. Um, yeah, I came across like the poison is in the dose. How many, micronutrients are you consuming throughout the day, and is that helping you, hurting you? We could dive into that
Ooh,
because
I
that kind
like
of
that. We
relates to
could,
like anxiety and, all that work as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, I like that. Let's go back to like supplements and stuff and talk about like what we've tried because you were just talking about you're really big on nootropics. So you talked about that at the
Hmm.
beginning of the show. So I think that'll be a good segue to go into the next one.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So hopefully next episode we'll go back to kind of where Heather started at the beginning of the podcast, talking about how Instagram was showing her every nootropic out there. She's been looking that up. So we both have kind of played around with different supplements, different nutrients, and different ways of giving ourselves everything that our bodies everything that they need. So I'm curious, what supplements do you take? What have you found that's working for you? And come back next episode, and we'll let you know what's working for us and the research that we've done to
I'm
learn even more.
excited about this one. I love talking about supplements.
What's your one that you're the most into right now?
Oh my gosh. Two. I have two that are tied. You need to be taking collagen. You need to be taking creatine. I'll leave it at that. We'll dive into that
Yeah.
more next episode because
All
those
right.
two,
I
man.
can't wait. I can't wait. All right.
All right, y'all. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.